Let's talk about 8 different types of power: legitimate, informational, coercive, reward, expert, referent, persuasive, and charismatic. These are all different types of power. We're going to talk about these as well as how they impact argument. So first, we're going to do an overview of power in argument. After that, we'll discuss and define legitimate power, informational power, coercive power, reward power, expert power, referent power, persuasive power, and charismatic power. So why is power important? Well, because power, according to your text, is the capacity to wield influence to shape important decisions that affect the lives of others. Okay, so power is your ability to use your influence to shape important decisions. So, that's everything, right? It's your ability to influence important decisions that affects the lives of other people. So that's important. Power is not just for money and fame, but power can be the capacity to argue effectively. And one of these types of power specifically we'll talk about here that really hits on this exactly. But power can come in a variety of different forms, but there is one type of power that can be created just through having sound, powerful, and well-created arguments. So there's 8 types of power. This is from a textbook called Working in Groups, but this is actually explained in a lot of different areas. This is actually a secondhand source, but the textbook explains it very well, so we're going to use some of their examples here as well. Okay, so if you're looking this up, that's where you can find it. First, let's talk about legitimate power. Each of these we're going to give just a quick definition and then also a quick example. So even though there's lots of different types of power, we're not going to spend too much time on each. Hopefully these will be pretty self-evident right when we go through it. So legitimate power, it relies on job title, formal authorization, or assigned duty. So someone with legitimate power would say, I have the authority and responsibility to lead. This would be like the power that your boss would have. Informational power. This person controls and transmits needed information. Someone who has informational power would say, I have the information that you need. Right? You don't have the information, I have the information that you need, and that gives me a certain type of power. Coercive power. This controls and deals out sanctions and punishments. Someone with coercive power would say, I can reprimand, discipline, and punish you. Reward power. This person controls and gives out resources that are valued by members. This person says, I can recognize, promote, and reward you. And notice when we say members here, this is really talking about just whoever is being talked about in a particular, usually it's in an organization or in some type of position. Referent power relies on members' opinions of and experience with the leader. So referent, if you think of the word referent, think of referral, right? So this is the opinions or experience. So if you have someone who you would be giving out as a referral, so you're referring someone to them, they would have referent power because of the opinion and experience, usually positive. This person says, I've earned your respect and trust. So we typically like these people who are using a referent power because they've earned your respect and trust. This is the type of power that if someone's using it to wield influence, you typically are more willing to go with this person because they've earned your respect and trust if it's something that seems pretty reasonable. Expert power relies on expertise and credentials. This person would say, I have the knowledge and skills that you need. Notice that this is something that you yourself probably don't have, right? It's that you need. Persuasive power, we love this one. This relies on effective communication skills. This person says, I know how to persuade and encourage others. So this one right here, if you are able to do well in this class, you internalize the content, you make it so it's actually real for you, so you're able to go out into the world and use some of the stuff that we talk about, you are increasing your persuasive power. Charismatic power, this relies on leaders' vitality, character, and competence. This person says, I have the energy, will, and passion to make things happen. So think about these types of power within 2 different really categories. We've got position power. We've also got personal power. So position power comes with the position. So think about this like in terms of an organization. So if you've got a job, you've got the boss who has a certain position, and that gives them certain types of power, right? You might come on after they've been there. You might not even know them, but just by having that job title, they're able to have certain types of powers that come with it. Okay, whereas you also have personal power, and this comes from personal characteristics. These are things that you can work on, things that you yourself can improve and can demonstrate through your personal characteristics. So if we were to categorize each, right, so we've got legitimate, informational, coercive, reward, expert, referent, persuasive, charismatic. So let's go through and label these. So first you saw that one. So legitimate, we'll label that, that's position power, right? So that's power given by an organization. Charismatic is actually a personal power. Reward is position power because within an organization, within some type of structure, you're able to give rewards. Coercive, same thing. Reward and coercive are kind of like two sides of the same coin. Informational is also a position type of power. Referent is a personal power. Persuasive is also personal, and expert is also personal. So these are just categorized next to each other. But hopefully this was something that as you were looking at it, you were kind of guessing and trying to figure these out as you went forward. So notice those top three, or top four, if you're able to get a certain position, a certain job that has a certain level of responsibility, you may be able to use those types of power in order to get things done. But then also, if you are not in any certain type of powerful position, you can still work on your expert, referent, persuasive, and charismatic types of power in order to gain your own type of power. So these 8 types of power, let's look at these, right? We've got 8 different types, but how does power really influence argument? Well, power and argument are interesting. Deductive arguments have what's called necessary conclusions, so they're less likely to be impacted by power. Now, what this means, it doesn't mean they aren't impacted by power. They're just sometimes less likely, or sometimes you have to go against logic in order to use your power to make them work. So deductive arguments have necessary conclusions, and what we mean by necessary conclusions is that when you look at the logic that's presented in a deductive argument, the conclusion can only be understood one way. Okay, if you have a sound deductive argument, they have a conclusion that can only be understood one way. There's not multiple, it's not like it's probably true. It either is true or it's not true. It is valid or it's not valid. Okay, so because of that, they're less likely to be impacted by power because there's less variability in the truth of, or the validity of the argument. Now, inductive arguments have what's called probable conclusions, so they're more likely to be influenced by power. Inductive arguments always have at least a certain level, it could be very small, but there's always a certain level of uncertainty within the conclusion. So there's always a small chance that it could either be less accurate or more accurate. So this makes it so because it's not 100% certain, then power can find its way into an inductive argument, and it can actually fill that inductive leap. That's what we call it, an inductive leap, that small area where we have to go from looking at all the evidence and then actually believing that something is true. Okay, so power can oftentimes influence argument, more so in inductive arguments. But all situations have a power dynamic. To some degree, all arguments are impacted by the power between the sender and the receiver of the message. Okay, but it's just looking at all of these and looking at the different types, right? We've got deductive arguments and inductive arguments. Inductive arguments are more likely, but both of these are always influenced by power, and both of them can definitely be influenced by all those different types of power. So what did we cover in this lecture? We looked at an overview of power and argument. We talked about legitimate, informational, coercive, reward, expert, referent, persuasive, and charismatic power. And we also talked about these impacts on inductive and deductive arguments. So when thinking about the 8 types of power, hopefully now you'll be able to think, what type of power do I have when I'm at school? What type of power do I have when I'm at work? When I'm at home with my family? When I'm with my friends? On a certain subject or on another type of subject? And how is my power influencing the way that I'm perceived when other people are hearing what it is that I have to say?